We're about to get started.
Same energy. And I'm also a lot.
I grew up,
They're not even out there.
Well, I think it's, I'm picturing the record microphone from.
yeah. Like right behind you.
All right, I'm going to bring us to order. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. I'm going to call this work session to order. We're here to discuss AM 626-2024, which is executive appointment confirmation hearing, Earl Malpass, Merrill Field Manager. Today is the 23rd of August. We are scheduled from 11:50 to 12:50. It is now 11:56. We'll start with introductions. Mr. Presverdia.
Cameron Perez-Verdia.
Karen Bronga.
Scott Myers.
Anna Brawley.
Christopher Constant on the phone. Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Thank you, Mr. Littlefield.
Here, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salt. You there, Mr. Salt?
Randy Foltz here.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Here.
All right, and with us we have Earl Malpass, Merrill Field, and also Becky Wynn Pearson, municipal manager. We start these processes by allowing the mayor or the manager to speak first. So, Ms. Wynn Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Assembly. I'm pleased to be here today to present Mr. Malpass for confirmation as Merrill Field Manager. Mr. Malpass applied and was offered employment by the previous administration, and we've spent the last several weeks getting to know him. And in getting to know him, we've really found him to be an excellent hire, an experienced airport leadership professional with a strong subject matter expertise and also a vision for our small airport and how we can drive it forward into the future. And I encourage you all to ask him about his vision and ideas today. I know from prior experience in two administrations ago that this can be a challenging position to fill, to find the person with the right marriage of technical expertise and passion for a small airport like Merrill Field. And I think Mr. Malpass will serve our municipality incredibly well in this position. You have his resume in front of you, and I won't reiterate it word for word, but he comes to us from 8 years managing the Washington Warren Airport in Washington, North Carolina, and has experience in that capacity across the various axes of regulatory, operational, financial, public relations, and business development requirements that come with managing a small airfield. Prior to that, he spent, I think, 17 years in Fairbanks, Alaska. So he has that magic combination of subject matter expertise and also connection to and deep experience in our great state. Before I let you ask Mr. Malpass your questions and move on to that section, I just want to call out just some highlights from the past week when we've been going through the budget process. And it was just really struck me how the extraordinary response to Mr. Malpass's work during that process. OMB Director Ona Brous, who just left the room, highlighted his presentation as one of the best that she saw from directors. Real attention to detail, a focus on the line items of the budget, and again, a long-term arc of vision for where the budget should go into the future. In that process, we also heard from some of his direct reports, his staff, tremendously positive responses to having solid professional leadership at the helm of Merrill Field and how much they appreciate him coming in to fill the role. So with that, I will turn it to questions from the body. But again, very thankful to be here presenting Mr. Malpass for confirmation by the Assembly.
Thank you. And so before questions from members, we allow the confirmee to speak, to introduce yourself and tell us whatever you want for a brief introduction. Mechanics wise, you press the button until the green light comes on, then you leave it on, and when you're done speaking, you turn it off lest you have a hot mic.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor and privilege to be able to be considered for this job. A little bit about myself is I'm a pilot, airplane mechanic, and aircraft inspector. So I've been an end user of airports for over 35 years. A lot of it was spent 17 years of it in Fairbanks. While at Fairbanks, I was a leaseholder. So again, kind of on the end user side of that. So I dealt with the international, the airport through the state, and had a good working relationship with the folks there. Have also managed folks from in previous lives at Allied Signal. It used to be Textron Lycom and then Allied Signal, and I think it's Honeywell now, but was a turbine engine overhaul shop. Why that's important is I started at the bottom of the roll cleaning parts, turbine engine parts, and moved to the operations manager of the facility. At the end part of it, I was a turbine engine operations manager, overhauling the entire engines, and was actually managing the people that had trained me to do that part of the job. And there was about 60 direct reports and indirect reports involved with that too, managing budgets and all those things. In Fairbanks, we enjoyed good success maintaining and getting along with folks. And I went down to the lower 48. We had some health issues with my wife and myself, and her mother was our last living parent, needed some help. So we went down there and got caught on the other side of COVID. So it took a while to get through that. And once that was through, while I was doing down there, I was the airport manager for those 8 years. It was a struggling airport that was just kind of out of sight, out of mind, just up on the hill. Was not looked at fondly because one, it made a bunch of noise, and two, it was drawing from the general fund. But I was able to kind of get it back up on its feet, was able to secure some state grant funding to be able to put in the infrastructure and get it ready for the next 20 years as a economic driver. My philosophy here, there, as well as here at Merrill Field, is to run the airport and looking at it in a holistic approach. Airports can be complex if you look at it. Sometimes you shy away from it, but it involves a lot. I see an airport as an economic driver to the community. I'm interested in working with economic development directors like I have in the past, and I have them on speed dial, and I've spent a lot of time through looking at economic development to better off a community, also with tourism, and that has an impact. But there's safety roles, there's the infrastructure of an airport, there's the personnel, and then the setting the vision, setting the goals, and then a path forward to achieve those goals. I was successful in the last one. I think this one in many ways will be easier. I'm kind of passionate about airports, and I think Anchorage and the state of Alaska has a lot to offer. There's more airplane and pilots per capita in Alaska than anywhere else in the world. So it's I'm looking forward to jumping into the role. I think I've been able to make some good inroads with the team that's already out there as well. On the operations side, you got a maintenance crew out there that operates a lot of heavy equipment, moving the snow, keeping the facility in good working order. And I've got some connection with that too. I've run before, farther back in my life, I've run all kinds of heavy equipment, sewer, water systems, putting in things like that. So I understand that side of things too, and looking forward to using those skills as we look forward to next summer when the airport will be refurbishing the primary runway out there as well. With that, I'll see if there are any questions. Be glad to answer them.
We'll start with Ms. Brawley.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for being here. So I represent West Anchorage. So I have, and before being on the assembly was community council member. So I have extensive experience on the community side of airport relations, but not so much experience on this side. So I guess my question is, well, I'll also say one of the insights that I've learned about airports is there's the aviation activities, but really from the airport's perspective, they are a landlord and, well, at the Ted Stevens, they've called it a mall, right? You have all these tenants. And so, and I know that's been a conversation that prior airport managers have had. So I'm curious, both from that perspective of a landlord, and as you said, economic development, kind of what are some of the thoughts or plans you have for I guess, expansion or maybe maximum use of that airport facility, and then how do you also see the other side of it, which is community relations and kind of managing the impacts of an airport? Because I think both of those are important.
Sure. Thank you for the question. Through the chair, the The economic aspect of it is critical. The airport has only got so many square feet of land mass. They're not making it anymore. So you have to be able to do with what you have, and you can't go vertical. So the options are purchase additional land. That's not going to happen at Merrill to any large degree, or utilize the land that you have a challenge there. I guess you know that there's a landfill underneath it, which greatly limits what kind of activities can go on it. But on the economic development side, there's about 43 tenants over there, land leases that have businesses. And I started attending meetings with them, just going by and meeting them, talking about their business, getting to know their businesses. These are the folks that are paying the bills. These are the ones that are we're kind of counting on. Without them, there's no need for an airport. So I've been building those relationships, and frankly, the responses I've gotten has been very positive from the tenants. I want to know what we want them to be successful. So what is it going to take for them in order to be the most successful that they can? They're the ones that bring the jobs. They're the ones paying the taxes. They're the ones that are delivering people to all over the state. So there's that part. And your comment about the landlord is right on. There's two philosophies to airports. One is you're a landlord. You don't really. You can own the buildings and you can rent the buildings out to tenants, or you can just be a kind of a property manager. You have the dirt, the business owns the building and they operate it, and you're just getting the rent on the dirt. You get more money if you own the building, but there's additional responsibilities. So that's a big philosophical question that has to be answered. We're already kind of maxed out. We charge more per square foot and for land lease, as well as tie downs and things like that, than other airports in the state. So where is the additional revenues going to come from? And I've got some thoughts. I'd like to run it through the administration and the bosses before we go forward. It's a big team decision. Through different management training I've learned empirically that no individual is stronger than the team. So it's a big conversation to have. Communication for communities is also key to airports. The previous airport I worked at, they had what they called the V-20 Marine Corps V-22 Osprey. It was a large aircraft that had tilt rotors. It could elevate like a helicopter. The engines would rotate and go forward. They are horrendously loud. And so there was we had the Marine Corps base those aircraft about 40 miles from our airport, and they used it as a training center. So there were complaints about that. And there was also skydiving, a skydiver going up. So there was noise complaints. People had no idea that there was an airport even there. So the community relations is a multifaceted topic as well. You mitigate the noise, and you give you highlight the strengths of the airport. What's the airport there for? What does the airport bring? How many jobs are related directly to the airport? How many jobs are related to the airport indirectly? How much revenue comes in? What's the economic impact of the airport? How many villages do the airport at Merrill Field? How many people are able to go to those villages from Merrill Field? Those types of things, and by not just if all folks hear about is the negative things, it reflects poorly on the airport. So part of it would be educating and informing the community of all the good things that are going on, and then working diligently to limit the negative aspects of airports as much as possible. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks. And I do have one quick follow-up, but I will say, I know the managing the community relations is really important. And I know that's something that Ted Stevens Airport has been sometimes good at, sometimes not good at. And I know that others can comment on the neighborhood relations with Merrill Field historically. But my other specific question also related to Ted Stevens and Lake Hood, because I think Lake Hood is more like Merrill Field than Ted Stevens. And tie downs, I'm glad you mentioned that. Plane parking, I know, is in high demand, but I am aware that there is basically a waiting list at Lake Hood. I think some of that is float plane, but some of it is also the tie downs, and they're trying to figure out how to increase their parking for planes. But so I guess, is there a wait list right now at Merrill Field, and what opportunity do you see, especially given that what you just said was our rates are higher, but there's clearly a mismatch of supply and demand in the city, and that is a state airport, we're a city airport.
Yes, through the chair. That's good points. There is a waiting list on our gravel airstrip where there's big Tundra tire aircraft that are operating on short. They don't need the pavement. So there's a waiting list on that. On the regular paved, not paved, but hard packed tie down parking, there's only 14. So there's over 800 single engine aircraft on the airport, but a lot of those are leased to our leaseholders who are leasing a parcel using the hangar, and then they rent out tie downs as well. So, but we have over 400 tie downs that we lease out ourselves, with only 14 the remaining, I believe is the number. So where do you get that? There's again, the airport is on that landfill. That complicates matters. You have to go in there and pack that down in order to make sure that it's stable enough that it won't be a constant sinkhole. But what I'm looking at is looking at areas that landfill is not so deep. That's part one. And part two, there's opportunities, I believe, and I've talked with the advisory board as well about having like covered tied downs, basically a pole barn that aircraft could park under. You can charge more for that type of parking than you could for just open air on the ramp. But we're also looking at extending some of the parking, or I've been looking at considering that where we have the waiting list, if we could extend that area and add more gravel, if you will, so that they could park, we could occupy those. So the question is, where am I going to get that? This next year, they'll be grinding up or milling the runway, and they're taking all that mill wrap grindings from the runway, and they're going to have to put it somewhere. We've got uses for about half of it. The other half, I'm hoping to be able to extend that parking area for additional tie-down parking spaces. The other aspect would be, we're talking airport in our own community, but I think it would be beneficial if the other airport managers kind of work together and discuss that problem, because what you're talking about is common everywhere. So if there's 3 or 4 airport managers that got together, discussed the concern, and if everybody's rent went up a little bit, the tie down rent here is not much different than it is in the lower 48. The exception is it costs us a whole lot more to maintain that, keep the snow off. Did that help?
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, Karen, and then myself. Go ahead, Ms. Marga.
You answered part of it. I was wondering what the challenges were for operating an airport that's on top of that landfill. And it sounds like it's just a lot more maintenance. And so that's one part of it. And the other part is just an observation that that corridor, because I'm coming in from East Anchorage to downtown, is so unattractive right now. And, it'd be really nice if we could build up to the north of the airport, the big timber motel I used to be a maid at, and it used to be kind of nice. And a lot of people who were flying into Merrill Field spent the night there. It would be kind of nice to explore a nice hotel in that area for people who are traveling, but something needs to be built up in the area.
Yes. And through the chair, thanks for that question. That's a good question. As far as the other challenges to the airport with the landfill is trying to mitigate the landfill gases. They move around, and they're coming through different orifices in the different facilities, and the gases can be deadly. So we're monitoring that. Another part is, how do you build on top of something like that? And the answer is, at this point, you have to bore down and put concrete columns 40 feet till you get to subgrade, and then you would build a slab on top of it. So that it's not impossible. Again, in a previous life, running heavy equipment and managing that we would demuck entire ponds, bringing in sand, 20 foot of sand, packing it, and then building a motel on top of that. So it can be done. It's just got to have a good return on investment. Regarding the aesthetics of the airport, that was one of the first things. It seemed like to me, coming back after 8 years, that Merrill, the aesthetics was kind of suffering. I think it's important. I see Merrill Field as a show window to Anchorage, the municipality. I see it as a kind of the main street, main runway is a main street to Merrill Field. And so aesthetics is pretty important to me, especially on the entrances. So depending on which corridor you're talking about coming in, one of the things that I'm hopeful to do in one of my longer term visions is in 2030, we're going to be celebrating our 100th, our centennial anniversary of the airport. It will have been around, first official airport of the state, and it's 100th birthday. So already, as I'm meeting with the stakeholders and they are looking in our budget, I want to start sharing that and say that if we wait till 2030 to start planning for that celebration, we've waited too long. So we're going to be talking to all of our leaseholders and asking them to budget and to be cognitive of the looks of the outside looks, and start spending some time and money to dress up our airport. When I look at a centennial celebration, I'm not talking about a weekend or even a week. I'd like to see, May, June, July type of a thing that would be pulling in from all the airports. You consider what the impact is. Like I said, it was I believe 179 villages that we in 2023 were reached by some of the charter outfits. There would be no mail, there would be no medevac in certain areas, certain villages, if it wasn't for Merrill Field. We've got one of the very few FAA allowed through the gate operations to get to the hospital, taxi right up to the hospital for medevac operations. So we got a great story. It's going to take more than a weekend to share that story. And when we tell it, we want to have a haircut and trimmed up and looking nice for when we show off what Merrill Field is. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. So I have myself in the queue, and I never had a chance to meet with you. When you first reached out, I didn't know where this administration was in their consideration of your application, and so I didn't want to get crosswise with their efforts. So it's nice they have put you forward or continued your nomination, and I have heard broadly from users of Merrill Field in a number of different venues about their support for you as the director, and so you come with a strong recommendation. I have a few thoughts and questions. I think that Ms. Braga actually asked a slightly different question, and that was about the north of the Merrill Field Airfield, which is across 5th, 6th, and that whole section of land. And this is a conversation that's happened previously with the directors and with other departments and even other entities in the community, of the idea that section of town, which basically spans from the Lucky Wishbone to the RV dealership at the corner of Airport Heights Road there, and the highway and Mountain View Drive, the industrial section that runs back basically to 3rd Avenue, not all the way down maybe, but is an area that, like the Mountain View neighborhood plan, was targeted and avoided it, even though it's in the Mountain View Community Council. The Fairview neighborhood plan has a thought for that area, which is a maker's neighborhood, a place where we create policies that allow people to live in an industrial environment so they can live where they work. And the conversation happened with Launch Alaska, I think they were called, where we were looking at novel ways to take that area and extend the campus of the airfield with its future initiatives that may be evolving. And I know that work with Launch Alaska kind of fell by the wayside at some point because a change in leadership at the municipality made it so that there wasn't so much innovation happening. But so I think that was an area of
Okay.
consideration that she was referring to, because if you just cross the street, it's a slum and it's a terrible spot and it could use a vision. Some have talked about like some kind of a college campus expansion. Some have talked about a like a climate resiliency incubator. I mean, there's a lot. So that was one piece I wanted to make sure we discussed. And you don't have to jazz on that here. It's just I wanted to make sure you understood what she was talking about a little bit more pointedly. So you've probably heard that my biggest issue or concern with the airfield is the community relations piece with the Fairview neighborhood. I have long been engaged in conversations with the various directors back to Paul Bauer sometime in the middle of his term. And it's been, for better or for worse, a relationship. And sometimes it's really worked and sometimes it hasn't. Paul Bauer operated as an imperious leader and basically got to the point where he wouldn't listen to the neighborhood, and it created so many conflicts that were avoidable. And the neighborhood, in my experience, has been eminently reasonable with the challenges that they face relating to the airfield. Noise being the first one, which is a universal issue around these airfields. Pilots flying out of pattern, which makes the noise very apparent to those who live underneath the pattern. And usually the out of pattern is they're overloaded, they're heavy, they're screaming loud, and they're 500 feet instead of 1,000 feet. And you can feel them rolling through your house. Your windows are rattling. Back in the day when we were flush with money, Ted Stevens made a major investment around Ted Stevens International Airport and created a program where people could just buy windows and the feds would pay for it. But that's not the environment we live in now. So what we have to do is ensure the working relationship between the neighbors and the airfield. Now, you also spoke about how there's no room to grow. I just suggested there might be some room to grow across the highway, 5th, 6th. But also the fear of the neighborhood is the endlessly hungry airfield, where by bits and pieces it expands. And the last example of that was across to Bar 15th on, I think it's Sitka Street. There is a house that was owned by this lovely old gentleman, Tracy or Stacy was his name. And the whole row of houses, it's the last row of houses before the kind of drop down into the Greenway into Sitka Park. Merrill Field basically pushed, we must buy these houses. You must sell us these houses because we need this, because it's in what was loosely termed the soft landing pad of the runway. And so the neighbors are concerned about the expansion of the airfield block by block, lot by lot, and especially as it incurs into the residential parts of the neighborhood. There's an empty house now just sitting there. Stacy died, and we have a housing crunch. And it's a great house, one of the best views anywhere in Anchorage, especially in the downtown. You look out that window in winter, you look like you're in a winter wonderland. You can't see a building, but no one's using it. And it's maybe slated for demolition someday, but what happens with empty properties is they become a problem for somebody. So that's a lot of predicate to really the question is, what is your theory and approach to community relations with the Fairview neighborhood?
Thank you, Chair. First off, I understand and what you're saying that you've heard it from my predecessors. I imagine that a lot of people have, and it's kind of like a drone. Like, yeah, I've heard it all before, so it's kind of hard to. I can tell you what my thoughts are as honestly as I can, but I can also understand that there'd be some skepticism. I've had that in the past, and I've been able to overcome it. One of the steps I've scheduled for two meetings with the community meeting members already. Alan from Fairview, Fairhill. Fairview. I've got two of them in my head, two communities from different locations, but I've met him, and we've talked. We kind of said, we'll discuss the noise conflict at a later date. But let's talk about things that we can agree on. And so I've had 2 meetings. I think I've got another one scheduled today at 1, in fact. But we've talked about a lot of what you're describing there on Orca Street. I understand there is a concern for creep. It's happened on both ends. There's tenants on the airport that are worried the community is going to take over the airport and close the airport down. So it's trying to deal with both of those. But my passion for economic development and industry and trying to do it together is pretty strong. Again, I was successful in doing that in my previous role. And when I see that area, and when I've talked with Alan, I listened to him, what his vision is, it's almost dovetails in many ways with my thoughts on that area there. There's up here, you don't hear the term very often. Down in the lower 48, especially in North Carolina. North Carolina is the first in flight, the Wright brothers and all that. And their phrase is first in flight. It used to be, now it's forever first in flight. And there's a big kind of battle amongst the states as who's going to take the lead in this next frontier of aviation. And the next frontier of aviation, they call it advanced air mobility, AAM. And it deals with different aspects that the looking towards the future of aviation. And it includes everything from UAVs, or commonly known as drones, like blimps. It includes vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, electric vertical takeoff and landing, and it includes just electric aircraft. So I'm still in communication with people that are in those industries, and we're trying to get to that airport. So what Alan and I have discussed is that first off, there's that school there that's kind of an anchor, the elementary school. It'd be great if we could be able to if I was able to get opportunities to talk to the school and discuss some of maybe make it a trade focus on the aviation and aerospace trade, and then with the community. And then when I asked Alan, I said, well, where do these students go after 6th grade? And he told me the school, it was a high school, and he says it's focused on technical trade type, aviation type, aerospace trade. And that's great. And then because if you look back into our back door, we have the University of Alaska at Anchorage, and it's got aircraft maintenance, aircraft flight, and they even have, if you haven't seen it, I'm finding out that I didn't know about it, but I'm finding out most don't. They've got one of the top 3 schools for air traffic controller, and they got a room that's a simulator the size of this room here that really ought to be taken into. But that's a great, so we're talking about taking students from the elementary school to a high school and then to the college, all in the same neighborhood. So what does that do? It takes a young family that wants to come in, start a family, start a home, and they would be able to stay there forever until the kids graduate, because they're raising the kids in that school. And then they could take them, they could have the other high school and then go to the college. So, and then there's also bringing some of those buildings into make it more compatible for advanced air mobility, design, engineering, those types of things. There's companies in the lower 48 that are building these things, and they need to test them in cold weather testing areas. Why not offer them something like that? So the aesthetics of that area of Orca Street and being able to make, clean it up, and that whole area, have it where it's more safe and appealing to the younger families, I think would be is a great goal.
So I don't know if others, I have a whole small stack of questions. And all of that sounds great. I do recommend, if you haven't had a chance, do reach out to the folks at Launch Alaska. It could be they're willing to reboot that conversation, because the Department of Energy was here. There was an effort to look at the schools. There was an effort to look at the interface between Merrill Field and the city. So I do highly recommend an opportunity to look into that. And that conversation did encompass some of the UAVs and the opportunities there. There was some whisper of a potential intent to expand a runway to make a jetway. I think I wouldn't recommend that. It would be a real fight. You'd see people come out of the woodworks, some support, but a lot of unhappy people because the airfield already can't manage sound and noise and impacts on the neighborhoods. Could you imagine if we had jets taking off there? That said, my next question is really along that interface between Orchard Street and the neighborhood, in particular the City Electric building. And I was by there last week. You know, there's campers parked along the way. Someone dropped a boat right on the property, like a boat. It's so random. And then there are, of course, holes cut through the fence into the electric property, which is the direct western edge of the runway. And there have been plans to mitigate the environmental so we could put that property into use. It seems like some pretty valuable property. What are your thoughts on the City Electric building?
I'm for it. It would, there are some, first off, it's on the airport layout plan, which is an FAA mandated document that says this is what the airport wants to do for the next 10 years, 20 years type of thing. So it's identified as potential purchase. The FAA is real reluctant to buy polluted land if it's got a lot of chemicals on it. There is a firm that's looking at purchasing the land. The current owner has been there's some health issues, and these guys are putting in a lot of effort to get access. But their primary goal is to purchase it and then do what's necessary, and then to be able to sell it to Merrill Field. There's lots of discussion on that topic. I think that would be critical. I have been by there. I've looked at it, and everything you said is correct. It's the biggest issue, in my opinion, on Merrill Field is the folks running across the runway and things like that, and they get through there. That's one of the areas between there and Holiday. So I've trying to implement some things to stop that as much as possible. But to get access to that property, I guess you could say it's purchasing. You know, you're not buying houses, you're buying a contaminated site that could be cleaned up. And then there's in Earl's mind, and in my, it's a great opportunity to build something that would be a big economic impact to the airport, but also the city with jobs and.
Right. I've heard the users down there say it could be a great spot for some condos for itinerant pilots and place to park your plane, and like basically a little hotel. It's an interesting idea to serve, but yes, something please, because that deterioration is ongoing and it's a safety hazard. So I still have more questions if no one else does. So the next one is in relationship, and I think I have two more really. So this one and one more, and then I can move on. The interface between the community and the airfield on 15th Avenue to bar the snow dump. So at the end of Mr. Bauer's term, he was hell-bent that he was going to develop more warehouse space, more basically storage and construction and workspace for the airfield on the snow dump site that is across the street there. And all of that land, including the land that is currently utilized as effectively Sitka Street Park, or at least a good portion of that. So have you looked into, and what is your thought on if you have that kind of land there?
I have looked at that, and I've asked a lot of questions, but I'm ending my 8th week, and it's been a lot of spokes that I've been reaching out. But that land, I understand, is the airport's. I also understand it'll never be a runway, a taxiway. You're not going to build a hangar on that property. So there's what are the options at that point? That would be part when I'm talking about the holistic approach to the airport. You know, that's in it. I just have there's there's a lot of discussion on different things, whether it's that or whether it's the other airports that would be pulled in. That's a big question that you got to pull in a lot of people in to get enough information. I feel I'd be irresponsible of me to try to fake my way through it. I haven't looked at, I know of it. I just haven't made any decision of.
So the neighbors would seek a project that would at least in part have neighborhood supportive infrastructure, not just an enclave unto the airport across the road from the airport, because it will have direct neighbors, and the direct neighbors will be people who live and sleep in that general land, right? So that I think is a very important piece of the kind of process. Arguments have been made, well, only airfield interests because it's FAA money and land, and coming up with a creative solution that is an integrated solution that meets the needs of people who are actually going to have to spend time 24/7 there versus the ones who pop in and pop out is a very high value to that land in particular.
Yes, sir. And I understand that there's, again, it may sound hokey, but when I'm looking at the airport, I'm also looking at the community, and housing is a big issue in this community as was in the previous. And so it's a bigger picture. We're not an island unto ourselves. So I can say for a fact that it'd be everybody that would be involved in that question.
This prime land. So the last piece, I was at the airport recently, Ted Stevens heading out on a trip to Vegas, and was stopped by some individuals whose family have business on the airfield and have for many years. You might be able to gather who they are. And they had a very specific concern I hadn't heard about, that the monument that's on the airfield land is falling into disrepair, and it's in the current condition of it's not my problem from all directions, one of these things. And so what is your understanding of the nature of the problem of the monument, and what are we going to do to fix it? Because what's being imputed is that this liberal assembly doesn't care about veterans, and they're letting it fall into the dirt, and that's a crazy thing to hear. We want to make sure we're keeping our infrastructure up. So what's the current condition of that, and where are we going?
You're right. That was one of the first things I saw. I'm a veteran, and I saw that, and I said, why is it blocked off? And so I've been asking a lot of questions, and I've experienced the same thing that you just described. Well, it's this person or that person. It was donated, and they donated it thinking it was going to be maintained. And it's not being maintained because it was done over the landfill. There were some sinkholes that's created an unsafe area don't want anyone to get hurt. So they just blocked it off, and there it is. That's where it's been. If I can find out certain information about what was the agreement when it was put on the property, who funded it. There's different avenues. If it's expensive in the airport, does not have it in its budget, and the municipal, maybe there's I'm just talking off the top of my head, but Parks and Rec, other departments that could help us solve the problem. We've got some great maintenance guys. We got heavy equipment. We got dirt. We can bolster it back up, but we need to analyze it and find out, because to me, it's kind of it's crying shame if you take and you donate money towards something and you put your heart and soul into a cause, and then it just is not respected and deteriorates. It's kind of hurtful to people. So I think we ought to work on that. We're also we just put another well system on the other turnout there to monitor the water. So I think that whole bike path or walk path there, as well as those turnouts, are important for the airport. And I wanted to kind of use that as an example and have like a term just left my mind, but as people walk around, they can see either the history of the airport or facts about aeronautics, what a GPS is and how airplanes use it, what makes an airplane fly, and all that kind of stuff. Interactive walkways, but to be able to use that, because it's a community airport. Our community ought to be proud of it and be able to utilize it.
So I would recommend, once you understand the ownership and who's responsible, that we talked to Senator Murkowski's office. This would be a small congressional designated expense veterans issue. It
Sure.
seems like it's an opportunity. So lastly, I'll comment that 2030 Centennial should be an air show year with J-Bear. And so you might actually start reaching out now to the Commandant General out there about how to integrate with their planning. I know it's 3 cycles out for them, but you know how rapid the military operates on these kind of things. And so I would link up with them.
That's a great, I am meeting up with them. I think it's next month. I wasn't smart enough to kind of count when the air show was. We're also going to be reaching out to folks like Alaska Airlines. How many of their pilots have gone through Merrill Field, and not only them, but the other airlines, and try and get them. We'll be looking for ways to utilize sponsorships to be able to help with some of the aesthetics at the airport, and want it to be a big deal. And I think that's a great idea. I'll do
Yeah,
that.
I mean, people don't understand, but there are many innovations in aviation that have come through that airfield that can be celebrated. There are many historic moments that have happened there. There's a lot of opportunity. So, okay, I don't have any more questions. If anyone else, anyone on the phone? Okay. Then if there aren't any other questions, I think that's everything I had. I would ask you to end on a question. Becky started this, Ms. Wynn Pearson started this by saying you have a lot of vision and ideas and you hope that we ask you about them. And so do you have any of your vision or ideas that we haven't heard about? And where would you like to end this on in terms of vision and ideas?
Well, I think the big picture, if you were to look at the centennial celebration, there's a lot of things going on at the airport. One of the things I'd like to do in the near future to kind of in preparation for being able to tell a great story about the airport on the centennial will be, I've already been working with colleagues back east who can do a really strong economic analysis, economic impacts, and be able to find out just how many ways the Merrill Field touches not only Anchorage, but the state and the different villages. I've had, I think, 4 of them done in the previous one. And I think when people understand the goodness of the airport, they become proud of it and they own it. To be perfectly frank, as I did that in the previous role, I didn't have to defend myself for very much at all, or the airport. People would start defending the airport because we kind of gave them ammunition. So we got that, but also the team there at the airport has been working very hard, struggling. My impression of what they've been doing is they're just kind of treading water, trying to stay above water and offer world-class customer service to the tenants and the folks that come through there. And they've been working very hard with some maybe outdated technology. I think we can be a lot more efficient at the airport. It makes us look more professional. There's less errors, and so that customer satisfaction will go up, but also employee satisfaction will go up. If you guys had a chance to meet the folks out there, I know there's a lot of employees with the municipality, but you got some real stars out there that are doing a good job, and we want to give them the tools they need to do their job as well as possible, make them enjoy it. We don't want to lose any good talent.
All right. One last note of caution, please, with your advisory commission, make sure you follow the open meetings rules and the public records rules. There was a time which the meetings just went quiet and they were just meeting, and those meetings weren't legal and nothing that happened in them would pass muster if challenged. So, but I think they kind of worked that out just recently in the last 6 months. And so you'll have some kind of support there. And this is a great job. It's a big job. You have lots of support, and we'll have this item before us, AM 626-2024. I think it's item 11A on the agenda for Tuesday night, and there's nothing else. We'll be adjourned. So,
Thank you very much.
and I believe we start back at noon, or no, at 1. I'm sorry, been an hour behind all day. Not in a work session, no. Yeah.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks. And it's at 12 or 1. I'm sorry again. Yes, 1.